the team of Friedman, Davis, and Skarren. So we're running down. We're starting with Legacy here. Ben Friedman, blue-black control, Andrew Elliot on colorless Eldrazi. Now over on the modern table in the middle, we have Jim Davis on Dredge versus Kiri Leydens on Obzon. And on standard, we have Frank Skarren playing blue-white mid-range versus Robert Romine on Jeskai control. Now, Ryan, blue-white mid-range Jeskai control. Remember saying I think the format might iterate? How about that? Those are cards that could be very well positioned today. Andrew Elliot will take the play, though, for our Legacy match. He will start with Ancient Tomb into Chalice of the Void on 1 on turn 1.
Friedman
Boom.
fails the Force of Will check. This is very bad news.
All right, so 1-mana spells are off the table for both players. Now, Ben Friedman, because he's just blue-black, doesn't have Abrupt Decay. His only way to destroy this is going to be his 1 main deck Engineered Explosives.
It's going to be rough to find that, too, because these Ponders, these Brainstorms, those are not going to play.
Yeah, he's going to have to naturally draw it. And he's not going to have much time. Andrew Elliot, 4 mana on the second turn, is going to go for Thought-Nuts here. Let's hope Explosives isn't in Ben's hand. And it is. We see Collective Brutality, Engineered Explosives, Jace, Ponder, 2 more lands.
This hand really does not do much of anything. You see access to some cards that are just countered outright by the Chalice. Jace the Mind Sculptor, which isn't going to do a whole lot in this kind of environment, facing down a 4/4 already.
Well, I think looks like he's going to take the Jace. So Jace is exiled. It does leave Ben his Engineered Explosive, so Ben does have an answer to Chalice. But yeah, that was a Brainstorm is that last card in Ben's hand, so both Brainstorm and Ponder turned off by Chalice of the Void. Ben really just has Engineered Explosives. But Andrew left him that card, and I'm interested in that play.
Yeah, leaving the Explosives there is going to eat up the Chalice here. The Jace was also a couple turns from coming down.
Right, so Ben will take the gift here. You see Engineered Explosives on 0. He'll crack both his fetch lands. And this means he'll be able to knock the Chalice off the board. He did have to go to 18 to do this, and Eldrazi brings the beats pretty fast. We see an Eye of Ugin from Andrew, an attack for 4. He'll play a free Eldrazi Mimic off that Eye. And his hand here looks like another Chalice of the Void.
That might explain what's happening here.
Sure. He's got another Chalice. It looks like an Endless one. And a land.
And this isn't Elliot's first rodeo. Didn't commit the Endless one or the second Chalice because the Explosion catches everything with 0. Even when you have +1/+1 counters on your Endless one, it's still a 0.
On end step here, Ben knocks the Chalice of the Void away. So for 1 turn here, Ben will resolve 1 drops. He did draw Deathrite Shaman as well, so going to try to get these cards out of his hand as quick as possible.
But again, because Elliot has sandbagged that Endless one, Friedman's going to take a lot of damage on the following turn. Eldrazi Mimic's going to become an XX in addition, and the Thought-Knot Seer is still hanging around.
Yeah, I guess X will be 7, just based on the cards in Andrew's hand.
Right.
Would put Ben to 3. Eldrazi, a really punishing deck of this mix of disruption and speed. So Ben will cast Ponder. Finds Brainstorm and 2 more lands, and then quickly puts those away.
Yeah, this is not the point in the game where Wasteland can really salvage anything. He has problems on the table. He needs to deal with these creatures.
Now, Ben fetched a double basic land here when he cracked those fetch lands. Is there, I suppose, what sort of punishment, what is he trying to play around here?
The colorless Eldrazi deck is a 4 Wasteland deck itself. You don't want to get wasted off of your mana.
So Ben will draw off the Ponder and play a duel. He's going to, looks like he got a Thought Scour on his Ponder. Casts Deathrite Shaman, and that may be it. Now he's going to need some sort of sweeper here, right? Some way to just kill all the creatures. Looking at his deck, what does he have available?
Really nothing in the way of sweepers. The only kind of sweeper effect in the main deck is that Engineered Explosives that doesn't really play here, and it's already been used. The deck generally overpowers the opponent using Planeswalkers, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Liliana the Veil, but that's just going to be too slow in this spot.
Andrew Elliot drew Eldrazi Temple, plays it, and he starts by casting Chalice of the Void for 1 again. Ben's going to Brainstorm in response. Looks like he's trying to find some sort of counter for it.
Yeah, would really need to Force of Will this one to continue playing this game.
Yeah, well, he could, if he has a fetch land in hand, I suppose he could shuffle away his 1 mana cards here.
He will have to draw 1 back at least, which is the problem.
And I guess if the Chalice is on the board, You know, one of his ways out is something like Fatal Push, Snapcaster, Fatal Push, but Chalice stops that.
Spreading the Brainstorm makes sense one way or the other because it won't do anything when the Chalice is on the table.
Here's Endless One for 6 from Andrew Elliott. And then that'll turn Eldrazi Mimic into a 6/6, so an attack for 10 drops Ben Friedman down to 4. Get the 6 on Endless One.
It would be a lot less good on this Chalice.
I'm going to say that doesn't even counter Gurmag Angler. So we're back to Ben. Ben drops to 4. Looks like he has 1 turn to avoid lethal here. Wasteland will not help. He's got Jace. He's got the mana for Jace. But that's not enough anymore.
On the table, Elliot has lethal 2 ways. Endless One plus Thought-Knot Seer.
Yeah, Endless One and Thought-Knot Seer are both lethal. And if Ben bounces either of those creatures with Jace, then Eldrazi Mimic becomes lethal.
Yep. Jace will not be enough here. And we saw him Brainstorm on the previous turn and redraw one of those cards. So Force of Will is also off the table. Can't imagine we'll be seeing one of those. Friedman does have the option to do something like Jace Bounce, use a Deathrite Shaman to attempt a Fatal Push on the Mimic. If Elliot remembers his Chalice trigger, that's not going to play, but it's really the only line that Friedman has available to him.
Ben's checking to see if he has another out here.
Looks like he's thinking about using Collective Brutality, kill the Mimic, gain some life. This makes it so the Thought-Knot Seer is not lethal on the following turn. He discards Snapcaster Mage to escalate the Brutality. Friedman's still off of a second green source besides the Shaman, so we can't use that to gain life at this point in time.
Yeah, looks like he's going to flash Snapcaster Mage into play as a chump blocker here. So he went up to 6 on that Brutality. Now he'll block Endless One and go back down to 2 from Thought-Knot. He's buying himself some time, but with that Chalice on 1, he doesn't actually have kill spells. Looks like Wasteland from Andrew Elliott will hit Ben Friedman's Underground Sea, leaves him with the Wasteland, and then he'll play Endbringer, and that's going to be enough for Ben.
That one's tough to beat, not to mention that Elliot's board outside of that was very impressive.
Yeah, it was questionable whether Ben could win that. I suppose he was looking at something like Jace, bounce, make another chump block, and a lot of hoping. But another threat will seal that one up. So the first game goes over to the team of Elliot, Leydens, and Romine. Andrew Elliott taking it in Legacy.
And this matchup certainly on the play with the turn 1 Chalice, and especially when Friedman fails the Force of Will check there. The colorless Eldrazi deck's going to be significantly favored. All
right, well, let's look over at this blue-black control deck, what they have brought in the sideboard for various matchups. Control decks, this can be the make or break point. So he's got in his sideboard 4 Thoughtseizes, 3 Surgical Extraction, 2 additional copies of Engineered Explosives, so that could bring him up to 3. And in the removal department, he's got 2 Diabolic Edicts, 2 Marsh Casualties. That's -1/-1 for 2 mana. Liliana the Last Hope. He has 1 Liliana of the Veil in the main, so this would be a second Liliana, though it's 1 of each. And then a Flusterstorm. I was looking for something like Damnation here, and I have to think he doesn't have it.
Yeah, in Legacy, more commonly, you really see Toxic Deluge, which would be a nice one to have as well.
Sure.
The tools he does have available, Thoughtseize certainly on the play. That can do a lot of work in this kind of matchup. But a lot of this other stuff is not very impactful. The Diabolic Edicts are pretty good. They can deal with a large creature.
I do like that. It kills. One of the things that seemed like Andrew Elliott's creatures get out of range very fast.
Right. You can use the explosives to deal with Chalice, so you kind of hope to counter it on the way down, but it's an option that's available. You could do something like use Marsh Casualties or even Liliana the Last Hope to deal with the Eldrazi Mimics. It's not pretty, but it's something that he has available to him. Given the 4 main deck Fatal Push, I don't think he'll necessarily be going this route. But it is something that he could be doing. Kind of depends on how much of this main deck stuff he really wants to get out of there. We go to Andrew Elliott's side. The colorless Eldrazi sideboard features 3 Spatial Contortion, 3 Fairy Macabre, 3 Thorn of Amethyst, 2 Ratchet Bomb, 2 All Is Dust, and 2 Pithing Needle. Yeah,
these are all like bullets for different matchups. Especially when you're a proactive deck like Eldrazi. I don't know if there's much, he needs to like have sideboard cards to address his bad matchups, but this isn't a bad matchup.
Right. He also kind of had to be guessing what the composition of Friedman's deck is. In game 1, he did see 2 Snapcaster Mages, which suggests kind of a slower
Control
deck.
something.
Right. There was Deathrite Shaman as well. You have to wonder if there's Delvers in the mix. If he's assuming Delvers, the Ratchet Bombs seem really good. Given this specific combination that Bet Friedman is playing, the All Is Dust are going to be quite powerful in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if he knows Ben Friedman as well, Ben tends to like black-based control decks, so good indicator that that's what he's playing. So you'd think All Is Dust might come in here?
It's going to be really powerful if it does. It gets rid of everything Ben's trying to do. Pithing Needle's another option. He saw Jace the Mind Sculptor in that game.
Right. Right. So that, and also I guess if you make Chalice and Needle engineered explosives, that might be a lock.
Well, you'd have to Needle explosives first.
Right.
You don't want to.
Right.
Otherwise, you counter it with your own Chalice.
But I think you could do that.
In theory.
All right. Well, they're going to get ready for a second game. Now, for all of you guys watching us over on Twitch TV, we're going to be broadcasting all weekend. So come, join us in the feature match area on the SCG Tour. You can, of course, watch us at twitch.tv/SCG Tour. We also can watch on the StarCityGames.com main page. Now, you also can join in our Twitch subscription program. So it's a $4.99 a month subscription. You get custom emoticons for our channel. On top of that, when we get to our elimination rounds tomorrow, you get to be part of the voting as to what players and what decks you want to see. So that's going to be running all weekend. And you can sign up on Twitch TV/SCG Tour.
This top 8, I expect it to be something else.
Yeah, that's something new we mentioned before. We're going to use top 8 instead of top 4 as we have the time this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Going to be a lot of Magic on Sunday.
So going to the sideboard, you mentioned there's this interesting thing going on where Ben wants to counter Andrew's spells like Chalice of the Void, except counter Magic against a 4 Cavern of Souls deck is really bad outside of that.
It's really hard to tag the creatures, and realistically, he has counter spells that he mostly just wants to tag Chalice. 1 copy of Spell Snare in Friedman's deck. He would love to be able to hit a Chalice of the Void with that, but by and large, it's going to be really tough to convert a Force of Will.
So while on our feature match, Andrew Elliot notches his team's first win. On the other side, Ben getting some help from his friends. Both Jim Davis and Frank Skarren in their modern and standard matches take the first game. So it is their team currently with the advantage.
On the middle table, I imagine that Dredge is pretty significantly advantaged in at least game 1 against Abzan.
Exactly.
We'll see what the sideboards look like there.
That kind of strategy, remember, Abzan is a deck all about making 2-for-1s. Dredge is a deck about making 5-for-1s. Graveyard strategies are traditionally a very good way to attack black-green.
Right.
Now, the downside is that Abzan and Jund and those decks have great sideboards.
Mm-hmm. We're underway in game 2. Friedman on the play. Basic Island into Ponder. And Friedman taking the card name literally, going to take some time to think about these 3 cards he's got on top. The recipe in the early game, he wants a way to deal with these early taxing effects that Elliot might have. Any Chalice of the Voids, what have you.
Yeah, he needs that turn 1 Chalice. He's got to be wary of that. We see a Wasteland first turn from Elliot and a go. Ben rewarded here for that basic island. He's got only 3 basics in his deck.
And I like Elliot leading on Wasteland here. It looks like his backup lands, I think another Wasteland, a Cavern of Souls, and a City of Traders. Obviously, turn 1 City of Traders,
that
no plays.
One's bad.
It's pretty bad. And the Wasteland is realistically the only land in his hand that he wants to expose to Wasteland before he's able to generate mana.
Yeah, the other one, so Cavern is very important in this matchup.
Right.
City of Traders, as you mentioned, you can't really play. So yeah, this seems fine. I think he also had a Mishra's Factory in hand. Remember, the deck's colorless, so.
A lot of good lands for a deck with no colored spells.
Yeah, Ben, another land and a go. Now here he will play the Cavern of Souls. Of course, naming Eldrazi. He'll try for Chalice of the Void on 1. Here's a check, and Ben, with a very clean answer, will Spell Snare it.
That one's not an Eldrazi.
No, that's a 1-of Spell Snare. It might have been the best card Ben could have had here.
In that spot, certainly.
He doesn't play a card like Spell Pierce in the deck, so actually hard countering that with I think that's the only card that 1-for-1 counters it.
He has a counter spell as well.
He has a 1-of counter spell, you're right. And then we'll Wasteland away Andrew's Cavern of Souls, so this is a much better exchange here for Ben.
And Elliot has a Thought-Knot Seer in hand. Ideally, he wanted that Cavern to stick around. He could play City of Traders this turn and get an uncounterable Thought-Knot Seer. This is a lot less good.
He has drawn in the last couple turns a Matter Reshaper and a Spatial Contortion. Contortion, the +3/-3 spell for 2. Interesting to see if that'll work here. It looks like Andrew's just going to try to get some small pressure. It's a second Wasteland and then a copy of Endless One for 2 mana.
Given that Friedman currently is not applying any pressure to Elliot, getting a creature on the table makes some sense. Friedman does have access to 3 Gurmag Anglers and 2 True Name Nemesis. It won't be difficult to invalidate the Endless One. Yeah,
but without... Endless One's an interesting card in this deck. And sometimes it's this 2/2 for 2, which looks really bad. Game 1, it was a 7/7 off 4 mana.
Played some games in a different-looking modern format where you could play Ayavugan and a couple 3 Endless Ones on the first turn. It's usually better than casting it for 2 real mana on turn 2.
Ben resolving his Brainstorm here. It looks like he's found another copy of Wasteland.
These Wastelands that Elliot currently controls are not very juicy targets for Friedman's Wasteland.
So he might put it back?
Given that Elliot's just casting an Endless One for 2, though,
I kind of like
wasting a Wasteland's fine.
Yeah, that could. If Andrew's best play on turn 2 was an Endless One for 2, it suggests that he doesn't have much action on 2 mana. If that's the case, why not keep him on 2 mana?
When you look at some of these decks, it can be the case where multiple Wastelands are going to be a significant problem for the blue deck to develop going forward. Though Friedman does have 2 islands and a basic swamp in his deck, so he can navigate around Wasteland pretty effectively.
Now this was all with Endless One on the stack. Now it does resolve. Elliot will pass. And see if Ben wants to draw that top card or whether he wants to shuffle it away. Looks like he's happy to draw it.
That's a scary thing right there.
Yeah, it's a sign of strength. Didn't want to draw the second one he put back, though, so he will now go get a mana with that Verdant Catacombs. Looks like he has a 3 mana play in True Name Nemesis. You mentioned it wasn't going to be hard to invalidate the Endless One, and this is why.
Yep.
3/1 with protection from Andrew means that it can block Endless One without taking damage.
Won't be hit by Spatial Contortion either, though this is a spot where the sideboard All Is Dust could be very impactful for Elliot. He has to get a lot more mana before he can cast that one.
Right.
But it's the only way he can really deal with this. He also has a Ratchet Bomb that's a much slower answer, though.
Yeah, he does have 2 double lands in his hand. He has City of Traders and Eldrazi Temple. So I guess if he finds that All Is Dust you're talking about, he is only 3 lands away from casting it.
Something worth noting, I believe I spot a Reality Smasher in Andrew Elliott's hand. That one actually it interacts with True Name Nemesis in a somewhat favorable way. If you attack, you still get to trample over for 4.
Right, I only have, even though the Nemesis won't die, you can still hit Nemesis for 1 trample for 4.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we have in Elliot's hand, he has all the requisite lands here. He's got City of Traders, Mishra's Factory, and Eldrazi Temple. He's got an Endless One. So rather, a Reality Smasher you'd mentioned. So play City of Traders and now go for Thought Knot Seer. Maybe seems I don't think we actually have the Eldrazi Temple. And it will be, the Thought Knot will get Force of Willed. Getting rid of Thought Scour. So yeah, no Temple. We have Matter Reshaper, Spatial Contortion, Reality Smasher, and then 1 more land.
And Elliot actually is not in a position where he can really leverage the Wastelands. And you saw Ben Friedman, he fetched 2 non-basics on the previous turn.
Yeah, if Andrew Wastelands away, if he starts trading lands, it's actually good for Ben.
Yeah, you just can't really cast any spells, and he's behind on board.
Ben's going to attack with True Name. Now he'll start the Wastelanding, wasting away Andrew's Wasteland, and now casting Gurmag Angler. And Ben, I love this. He's attacking Andrew's mana, and Andrew's helping him along by playing that City of Traders.
Right.
Ben has gone on the attack. Cavern of Souls the draw for Elliot, but when he plays it, he'll lose that City of Traders. So here's 3 mana for Matter Reshaper. And Andrew's just going to pass. He has 2 lands in hand, but he doesn't want to let City of Traders go just yet.
He had a legal play on this turn. As things stands, he can put these 2 creatures in front of the Gurmag Angler and trade that way. The Reshaper will replace itself. And if he draws or produces a 2 mana land, I guess he would have to put it in his hand because the City of Traders would die if he was put one in the play even off the Reshaper.
Okay.
But he's setting up to draw a 2-mana land and cast Reality Smasher on the following turn.
Ben continues to push some advantage. Here is Snapcaster Mage, flashing back Ponder, and he found a good one in the top 3. It looks like Liliana of the Veil is one of the options. That card looks really good on this board.
Yes. The True Name Nemesis already just checks one of these creatures. Gurmag Angler is bigger than both, and the Snapcaster Mage actually trades with both as well. So just using Liliana to clean up a little bit and then start plucking away at the hand.
Yeah, normally I wouldn't like Liliana on a board with Matter Shaper, but right here, it seems fine. Ben taking a defensive, kind of a hybrid role here. He'll swing with True Name Nemesis and leave back the Angler as a blocker. And now it's decision time for Elliot. He draws Eye of Ugin. He keeps drawing lands, and pretty good ones at that. At some point here, it's going to make him want to get rid of that City of Traders.
This would allow him to smash run this turn. Now that the Gurmag Angler is on the table, it's much less impressive.
He will attack with both.
Plan seems to be that if the Angler blocks, he can use Spatial Contortion to finish it off. It'd be difficult to otherwise meaningfully leverage that Spatial Contortion, so this line does make sense. Can't kill the True Name Nemesis with it. You don't want to hit the Snapcaster Mage with it.
And that is going to be the block. Snapcaster on Endless One. Angler on Matter Reshaper. Now, because of the timing here, he may not be able to cast Smasher depending on what Reshaper hits.
I think that the plan here is just to cast Spatial Contortion anyway.
Okay.
Ben asking, I believe, for the Oracle text of City of Traders. It is an old card.
He wants to make sure it works the way it says it works.
Right.
So asks the judge about that. Looks like that was asked before blocks are finalized, so now he will block this way. And Andrew's going to make the trade here, Spatial Contortion and Endless One for Gurmag Angler. And Matter Shaper gets in for 3 damage, so Ben goes down to 15.
It's like a build your own Force of Will.
Yeah, that play still seemed really good for Ben, and Anders continues to not deploy lands.
As things stand, he'll still have the option to make the Reality Smasher on the following turn, which is a lot better now that Gurmag Angler is off the table.
Yeah, I do like being able to trade the trade he made there. It does open the window for Angler. Brainstorm from Ben. There are still some risks, though, right? If Ben finds another Wasteland, this is over.
It would be big trouble.
And on the Brainstorm, it looks like Ben might be getting rid of that Liliana. He's got Snapcaster, Fatal Push, and a land left in his hand. So he will swing for 5. Elliot drops down to 9, and he says go with removal spell up. Ancient Tomb, the draw for Elliot. And it looks like now he is going to make the play. City of Traders making 2. Wasteland makes 3. Eye of Ugin discounts Reality Smasher to 3 mana, and here is the 5/5.
And as the damage race stood before, Elliot was on 9, a little bit behind, but now he has Friedman on a 2-turn clock with these creatures.
Yeah, Snapcaster and Fatal Push not doing much. Ben will flash Snapcaster Mage into play. It can block Matter Reshaper. They'll trade. Ben will go to 10. And what will Matter Reshaper shape into? A Wasteland. He says go. Looks like Elliot's hand is just lands at this point, though.
The Wasteland's a fine pickup. You can't take Friedman off any colors, though. You can take him off green, but green's not very meaningful for him.
Yeah, it looks like Andrew still wants the mana sources more than Ben.
Right. You know, Friedman with 2 Underground Seas, he'll be able to cast Liliana no matter what on the following turn.
Yeah, and that's the nice setup, is that Ben, you saw that Snapcaster Mage gave him Brainstorm on end step. He does get to draw into that Liliana again, and that's a great answer for Reality Smasher.
Right. Yeah, particularly blocking that Matter Reshaper with the Snapcaster Mage. Now that's the only creature there.
Yeah, had Matter Reshaper flipped another creature off the top, this could have been a more difficult board for Ben. It didn't, and he should be able to clean up and force a 3rd game.
And it would have had to have been one of the cheap creatures, too. Something like Eldrazi Mimic.
Something that can't be fatal pushed with Revolt.
Something that can be cast. Elliot's pretty light on mana.
Oh, right.
It would have to cost 3 or less.
Liliana -2, Smasher's down. Elliot to 4. His hand is all lands. He draws, looks like a Warping Whale. That's not going to save him here. Well, I guess it'll buy him a turn. It can kill Snapcaster Mage. Ancient Tomb and pass. That's not a land he can ever tap, though.
Right. And he's 1 mana shy of all his dusting on that turn, even if he had it.
Right. Well, it's a land that when he taps, he will pay a punishment for it. So here's Brainstorm from Ben. Warping Whale kills Snapcaster Mage before the Brainstorm goes off. But Andrew will go down to 1 on an attack this turn. You see Ben picking up some of those sideboarded Diabolic Edicts that game.
And there's no pickup for Elliot that will solve this problem if Friedman attacks here. This attack with the Trinity Nemesis is functionally a wasteland on the Ancient Tomb.
Right, so because it puts Elliot to 1, Ben doesn't have to respect all his dust anymore.
Right.
And he'll make another True Name. Say go, and that should send us to a 3rd game. Andrew will go out on his own terms, taps Ancient Tomb. So, sideboard game goes in the direction of Ben Friedman. So he picks up a game. So now all for the team on the left, all of them 1 game away from winning their respective matches.
And if we go back to sideboards, if Elliot didn't have all this dust before, he's certainly reaching for it now. The Ratchet Bomb also easier to leverage on the play.
Yeah, I do like Ratchet Bomb here. True Name Nemesis did a lot of work there. That game went for Ben. There still felt like there were some structural difficulties in the matchup. Ben was pretty far ahead, right? He kept the board clean. He got a True Name Nemesis down early. And even then, you felt like his control of the game was loose.
Yeah, and a lot of that was Elliot's inability to generate as much mana as he needed as fast as he needed to.
Yeah, his lands are tapping for 1.
And at the end of the game, his hand was pretty gummed up with more lands as well. But that is one thing about these blue decks versus the non-blue decks in Legacy. Friedman has a lot more control over the cards that he draws. Saw him cast multiple Brainstorms, Ponder, what have you. Much higher access to the spells that he wants to draw when he wants to draw them.
Looks like we have 1 handshake. You saw that on your screen. 2-0. Frank Skarren, the winner over Robert Romine. So we're going to take a look quickly at Frank Skarren's deck list. Blue-white mid-range is very interesting here. We had talked before about decks that might see play now that it's a 2-deck meta. And I think both these players were doing it. Robert Romine is a 4 Torrential Gearhulk deck with no other creatures, which we're saying, hey, that might be good now. Frank Skarren, another thing I know that you and I are talking about might be good, he's a 4 Spell Queller, 4 Archangel Avacyn deck. Certainly that is something which I expect to be great against Marvel.
And in terms of spell quality, Robert was going up to Torrential Gearhulk. That is a concern, but a lot of his deck is positioned in a way that's really tough to beat a blue-white flash deck. Immolating Glare is really difficult to leverage. The Declaration in Stone's not great against a deck that's playing on your end step.
Do you think so? I want to say, so Frank Skarren's winning list, 3 Censors, 4 Spell Quellers. You'd have to think this is him respecting Marvel and showing that it can be beaten.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, the one question I have is, I believe Frank is great against Marvel looking at this list. Is he going to be good against Zombies too?
Zombies is going to be a little bit tougher, harder to meaningfully leverage a Censor, because the Zombies has probably already got some board presence at that point in time. Certainly on the draw. Declaration in Stone's really good in that matchup, though. He has some Stasis Snares as well.
Oh, if this team moves on, I imagine we might see some of that deck later on in the tournament. Certainly, what I like to see from both these teams is Standard is iterating it already since last week.
Right. It's usually true going into the Pro Tour that the format's going to change when that actual tournament happens, and the hope is always that the format continues to evolve after the Pro Tour itself.
Right. So in our Legacy player, Ben Friedman, he's the blue-black control player from Baltimore, Maryland. He's got 9 open top 8s with a win. The 24-year-old, also a full 5 invitational top 8s. 40-card Friedman here. Really one of the stronger players when you see on the SCG Tour. One of the great legacy pilot here on this team.
I really enjoy the nickname 40-card Friedman a lot more knowing the origin story.
He doesn't actually play Limited?
That he didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's less funny if he's just good at Limited, but it's really funny if he doesn't like playing it.
And now part of Team Metagame Gurus as well, joining the team for this season, along with team captain Jim Davis here.
Friedman was an advocate for the Metagame Guru jersey being rompers, along with Kevin Jones, though he's no longer on the team.
Yeah, for the Gurus, one of the teams that they have this weekend as well. Good successes with them here. Mentioned Jim Davis, of course, was a former Players Champion.
Friedman actually runner-up at the Season 3 Invitational last year.
Yeah, playing the finals against Jacob Baugh. Andrew Elliott's on a mulligan this game. Now remember, he's back on the play, and Eldrazi, as one of the non-brainstorm decks here in Legacy, does mulligan some, though it's not on the straight card advantage axis, so some of its sixes are great.
It's a deck that has to have an excellent play on turn 1 or turn 2 to really hang, in particular with a Wasteland deck.
Right.
You can't just do nothing and then get wastelanded and force a willed one side of the game. You know, that's how you're going to lose, is keeping a hand that's too slow with this deck.
Team of Elliot, Leydens, and Romine back against the wall here. They cannot drop another game. The magic number here is 5. Once you're in a team format, once your team wins 5 games, you will, by necessity, win the round. You see, for the Metagame Gurus, they've already won 4.
Halfway there.
Keeping on 6 is Elliot. He starts on Eldrazi Temple, no play. You'd expect something big here on the second turn then, if this is the hand he's kept.
Either a Thought-Knot Seer or a more honest Chalice of the Void.
Deathrite Shaman, the turn 1 play for Ben Friedman, and Andrew will quickly dismember it. Looks like Ben could have Force of Willed there, but chose not to.
That would be an aggressive use of Force of Will, in particular against a deck with such scary potential 2s.
Andrew makes Matter Reshaper. Interestingly, he had the choice of Matter Reshaper or Wasteland away Ben's Tropical Island. Easily chose the Reshaper here. And a replacement, Deathrite Shaman, and Creeping Tar Pit for Ben Friedman.
And I guess a Deathrite Shaman deck against a deck that's very heavy on 1-mana spells, aggressively wastelanding them is often akin to wastelanding yourself.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. I don't know that Andrew has any other lands in his hand.
That makes the wasteland all the more valuable.
He will Spatial Contortion the Shaman. Does this earn the Force of Will from Ben? Ben's thinking about it.
This one is certainly more important than the first. You have to think that if Elliot had a Chalice, he would have led on that.
Right. If Ben's not forcing here, what's he saving it for?
There's plenty of more scary cards. Letting your creature go, assuming that Ben has any kind of reasonable follow-up, is generally going to be fine. But Ben asks how else what you're worried about. Is he making his land drop next turn? Is this Wasteland becoming a bigger issue for him over time? And
he will Force of Will pitching Brainstorm to counter. Takes 3 on the Reshaper. Now, there are no lands in the graveyard yet. I assume Ben's got a fetch land if he's willing to fight over this.
Yep.
And there it is.
Peel the Wasteland as well.
Well, that'll definitely come to play later as you see Andrew Elliott missing the land drop. Right now, though, it looks like Ben wants 4 mana.
This smells like a Planeswalker to me.
I mean, yeah, Jace unsummoning the Matter Reshaper is huge here if he has it.
On the following turn, he could use the Jace to unsummon again, wasteland the Eldrazi Temple. Suddenly he's very far ahead.
And that is going to be the play. Here's Jace putting Matter Reshaper back into Andrew's hand. And you talked about how Andrew needed a really strong play on the first 2 turns. I don't think Matter Reshaper is good enough.
I do not put it in that category.
Right. And you see, all he does is recast. So now that line you're talking about, Unsummon and Wasteland, looking really good for Ben Friedman. Could he even Brainstorm and Wasteland is fantastic here.
Yeah, if he had some kind of removal spell for the Matter Reshaper, why not?
Looking to seal this one up as Ben Friedman. This win will bring the Metagame Gurus the round victory.
Friedman, a very disciplined player, making sure he's not missing anything. Certainly if you can Brainstorm with Jace, you want to.
And there we go. Matter Reshaper, but it's put back into Andrew's hand. Wasteland knocks the Eldrazi Temple off the board. And Ben Trying to leave his opponent here without permanence. Will Thought Scour himself. Gets rid of Gurmag Angler and Force of Will. Draws a mystery card. Looks like it's a Brainstorm. That's always a welcome card.
He would have liked to have drawn the Angler, but Brainstorm's certainly not a bad one.
Well, he already has Jace in play, right? And at that point, if this Jace sticks around, if it doesn't say get Pithing Needled next turn, this isn't going to matter. Jace will win him the game.
Yeah.
Well, Leydens does take the game number 2 off Jim Davis. I'm not sure that one's, they're going to go shuffle up for game 3. Not sure it's going to matter, as Andrew Elliot does not have another land. He'll dismember the Deathrite Shaman. Going to 12, but he's caught behind a Jace without any cards in play.
And Elliot's draw for the turn, one of the more contextually powerful, very played legacy cards, Umezawa's Jite. Sometimes great, here just a punch in the gut.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's not a land is going to hurt him. And you see, we now untap. Ben gets untapped with a Jace and a fetch land in play, and he's going to go to work, drawing 3. Putting 2 back, I suppose. He did draw 3 lands. So for right now, he doesn't have much going on.
Well, Elliot's already down to 12. That's 4 hits with the Creeping Tar Pit.
Fair enough, yeah, the 2 dismembers.
And if Elliot just wastelands the Tar Pit, well, he has 0 permanence.
Yeah, he really can't use the Wasteland here. And that's what we've seen both games. Actually, despite being the color stack, it's been Ben that's the Wasteland deck, not Andrew. Andrew's had Wastelands in play, both games 2 and 3, that he just couldn't use.
Right. Cares a lot more about their ability to produce mana than Friedman does.
How about this? A second Planeswalker for Ben. He finds it off his Ponder. Maybe he's not going to hit with Tar Pit. He may just play that Planeswalker here. Yeah, sounds good. Fetch land, Liliana of the Veil. Looks like he's going to discard his... Play Engineer Explosives for 0. That's the last card in his hand, and then he takes up the Liliana.
Yep, the plan for that all along, likely just to hit Chalice of the Void anyway.
Ben has no cards, so this is just making Andrew discard. And Andrew draws Chalice of the Void. Well, that's, first of all, not particularly castable right now. Second, it also gets hit by the Engineered Explosives.
Yep.
Endless 1-for-1 from Andrew Elliot.
Not the juiciest target for that Engineered Explosives, but Friedman does have that covered multiple ways.
Yeah, I mean, it seems fine, right? He can block it with Tar Pit. He can Engineered Explosives it.
He can Fatal Push it.
And that's his draw. Liliana pluses to make Andrew discard. Then Ben brainstorms to put cards back in his own hand.
And a Snapcaster Mage, a Deathrite Shaman. This is a mighty nice find.
And it will be Deathrite Shaman, and he'll say go, making sure to leave up that Engineered Explosives. Still no lands for Elliot, which at this point now means no plays. And it looks like Ben's going to seal this one up. Eldrazi, now when it first came out, was a very popular deck. Around the time of Eldrazi Winter. In the last year, I mean, I guess Eldrazi, we're in Louisville right now. It was the last time we were in Louisville covering an Open, that was really at the height of Eldrazi during Eldrazi Winter. Austin Holcomb winning the Open then. Actually defeating Eldrazi with Affinity, but I remember the top 8 being 5 Eldrazi decks.
There was a lot of it.
In Legacy, though, so a lot of people said this might be a great Legacy deck. It really hasn't put up the numbers, especially if you look at like the last 6 months.
So the deck, it has a lot of overlap with the Vintage Workshop strategy. The power level is clearly much, much lower. In particular, you don't have a land as powerful as Mishra's Workshop, and the fact that it's not legal means you have 1 fewer land that's very good on turn 1.
So Andrew finally did hit a land, which means he has a play. It is Matter Reshaper. Though Ben should have this covered. On end step, he exiled away Andrew's Dismember to put Andrew down to 10. He can't really unsummon the Reshaper yet. I mean, he could, but it would cost him his Jace.
I would hate to spend the Jace on that. The Reshaper is pretty well covered otherwise, though.
Yeah, Jace has continued to brainstorm. Looks like he's found Gurmag Angler. Between Angler, Tar Pit, and these 2 points of damage that he can do off Deathrite Shaman, I think we're looking at 1 or 2 turns.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that shop-style strategy is typically considered good against control. You know, you'd think if these City of Traders decks are going to be good. They'd be good in the matchup. And this probably is still a matchup that Andrew wanted to hit. But there's some tellingness that if you're he's going to lose this match. And while he might be a favorite, it may not be by enough.
The colorless Eldrazi deck simply has a higher fail rate. This is something that you see when people talk about a lot of matchups in Legacy, non-blue decks against Force of Will decks. You have a lot of permanents that are very, very powerful. The issue is you just kind of cast your cards out of your hand as you draw them. They have ways to filter their draws. They have answers to all of your stuff, at least some of the time. They can Force of Will your thing on the way down. They can Spell Snare your Chalice of the Void. They're fully capable of wastelanding you off of your sources, like denying you the ability to play the game as well. You just have a higher fail rate than the decks that you're trying to beat do.
Yeah, it's that cost of not playing Brainstorm just means that all of that's going to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Brainstorm going to find a Gurmag Angler. Ben right now delving away for the delving away 6 mana to cast that for just a single black. Meantime, Liliana has taken care of most of Andrew Elliott's hand. He's left with just an All Is Dust. Couple lands away from that one. Some questions about what Legacy would be like without Sensei's Divining Top. Would Control still be good? Ben Friedman showing us that it's just fine right now. So it looks like he'll win our first Legacy match on camera.
You notice this is also a departure from the 4-color controls decks that we saw previously. That deck's existence had a lot to do with how the format looked around Sensei's Divining Top as well. So it makes sense that you wouldn't see too much of that deck this weekend.
Yeah, this reminds me of, I think, the old Sultai control decks we've seen in Legacy. Just a lot of different ones, except that because Counterbalance has gone as a card, it seems like the stock in Abrupt Decay has gone down.
Mm-hmm. That much is certainly true.
Like what's there, Abrupt Decay is a fine card. Before it was a necessary card, but now it's just fine. I mean, what all is there to, I'd ask, what must you Abrupt Decay in Legacy right now with Counterbalance gone? Is there something that it has to be there for?
Yeah, there's really not too much. It hits Chalice the Void. That would have come in handy some percentage of these games.
If they're going to try Chalice on Tuya, you can still get it.
It's difficult to Abrupt Decay a Blood Moon, but it's a play sometimes.
And game for Ben Friedman. Match for Metagame Gurus. 2-0. They take the first round. Congratulations to the team of Friedman, Davis, and Skarren. Start the tournament at a 1-0.
Yeah, really cool deck by Friedman here. I wouldn't be surprised to see more colorless Eldrazi in the Legacy seat. Andrew Elliott not taking the match there, but the deck is quite powerful.